Hello and welcome to this edition of Elvenhome after a 4-week break. You'll see the start of the work that I'm doing on the build of the hotel, the Art Deco Hotel, and the care that I'm taking to create the base. Some unexpected happenings at Greyhaven Station which have come out rather well in the end, and various other small bits of work that is now being done as I start to work on the scenic work to the left hand of the station as it curves round to the junction. One or two running sessions, one of which is perhaps something of a surprise. But there you go. So I'll speak to you again at the end of the video when I'll take you through the smaller things that I've been doing. But first of all, let's go and have a look at the work on the Art Deco Hotel. This is the first video or section of video dealing with the actual build of the railway hotel. You'll know that I've been agonising over what the design should be, and in the last time you saw anything I had done a mock-up of one of the floors just to start finalising in my mind the design. On the basis of that mock-up, and I'll come back to that in just a moment, I've now completed the drawings for the hotel, and that's what you see in front of you. One of the things that I have done, and that's what these two images down here, these two plans down here are, is to work out roughly what the design of a floor would be. Not because I'm intending to actually model them necessarily, but because the internal layout of a building is reflected externally by where windows and doors and other things would be. And obviously, at the very least, the walls, when I cut the walls, I need to be able to cut things like fire escapes, but also the positioning of windows and the like. The plans actually are slightly different from the mock-up design. They're slightly longer because I took the decision that with the corner wall, which is put at an angle, it's obviously that's a right-angled triangle. And the sides of the opposite and adjacent sides is 10 millimeters. I'll use millimeters because that's easier. And that works okay. And that gives you something very roughly about 14 millimeters there. It's not quite that, but it's very roughly. But as you can see, once the window is on there, and that's window frame is about right, it really doesn't leave much wall either side, and it means the hole that's been cut inside, if I turn it round, leaves very little card on either side of that part of the wall. And as I've discovered in other models that I've built, that's really quite dangerous. You've got all sorts of, it may just not be structurally sound. Secondly, this front piece of wall was only 5 millimeters wide, and there again, let's bring this up, sorry, this front piece of wall here was only 5 millimeters wide, and that again is really quite fine, and may present all sorts of problems when we come to try and build the thing. So I decided to lengthen both. So now the opposite side is now 15 millimeters long, and the adjacent side is still 10, but that means that this distance here is now very nearly 18 millimeters long, but with the same width here will give enough either side, and I think it will look much better. And the front piece of wall has been doubled in length to be 10 millimeters. So the next stage for me is to cut out the base of the hotel, and this is going to require me to be very accurate indeed, because everything will depend on the base being accurate. And so I'll just move this away and prepare the base and cut it out and explain the process by which I've gone through in creating the base and making sure the cuts and the lines are accurate. Just to complete this first build video, this is the base of the hotel, which I've now cut out, and I've taken a lot of trouble and time to make sure that it is that all the measurements on it are absolutely accurate, because if I get this base wrong, nothing else is going to be right going building on top of it. So I've been so painstaking. You can see the micrometer above, and I've used that to make sure that all these lines are exactly the right distance from the edge of the paper that they're meant to be, depending where I'm measuring from. A top tip when you're cutting is two things. One, I found, obviously you use a ruler to measure things, but it's all too easy when you make the mark where you think you're making the mark exactly level with the distance that you're measuring, to find that you're ever so slightly out, or that the point from which you're measuring is ever so slightly out, not in line. So for example, this is the ruler that I've been using. It's a perfectly good ruler, but because it starts in from the edge of the ruler, when you line that up here, if you're very slightly out when you line that up, you're obviously going to be very slightly out at the other side. And I had 3 or 4 goes at trying to cut this piece of card, and each time I discovered that one end was 0.5 millimeter out from another. And as I say, these cumulative errors, if you're not careful, by the time you finish building it, the whole thing's wonky and nothing's fitting together, and I will have gaps that need filling, which it would be better to try and avoid. So the micrometer came out, and I found that a much better. If you're scratch building, you probably would end up getting one of these at some point anyway, because they're really good at giving you an accurate measure. So if I want something to be 20, the distance between those two blades is 20, which, as you can see, is that distance there, which makes it absolutely accurate. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. The other tip, when you draw a line, once you've carefully measured, if you cut inside the line, you've automatically cut shorter than the distance that you need to be. The line is exactly the distance that you want. That's what you've measured. So you need to cut up to the line, but not inside it, because otherwise you then discover, by the time you've done cuts all the way around, you can take anything up to 1 millimeter or so off the length of the card, and you're in deep trouble. So those are just some tips to make sure that this is absolutely accurate. So that's the end of this section, and now on to the next section of the video. Well, you may be a little surprised to see Greyhaven Station sitting here on the desk. Some time ago, the light that provides internal light to the station building stopped working. Those of you who've been watching my videos for a while will know that I've had a number of problems with lamps in the church, and the light that went in here was from the same batch as the lights that went into the church, and it started playing up in just the same way. And I'd been meaning to try and replace it, except that when I did the ballasting up by this station, I thought I'd stuck this in really rather hard. It finally, I'd finally had too much and allowed myself to pull gently at the station, only a bit less gently, and it came away very easily. And having the station away from the layout has allowed me just to have a good look at it and to correct 1 or 2 other small things. What I'm proposing to do, and they're on order, so I'm hoping they'll come in the next day or 2 before I put this video up, and if I do, then this will cut to the next section, is to put some more lights on the station, because I think there would be platform lights. Probably some swan neck lights are on order, one to go up here and one about here, which will be at the bottom of the stair as it comes down. The platform had also, when I put the ballasting in and fitted the platform in, something odd happened, such that it made the platform buckle. And what I've been able to do this morning to correct that is to change the design at the end of the platform. That used to be square, and this morning I remeasured it and have made it taper. Put it back on the layouts to where it will now be sitting, so it will all sit flat and trains pass perfectly happily. So what's proposed is to find a way of fitting a light into the building. The original light sits up here in the roof and gives light down. Well, this roof is very well stuck on, and I'm not going to try and disturb the building to put that right. So it should have 2 platform lights and a new internal light, which I think I'm going to wire through to one of those power distribution boards where I can use the dimmer to dim the light down a bit so it's not too powerful when this is working. So we'll see where we've got to by the time this goes up. This may be the only short section about Grey Havens, but I'm hopeful that the things will turn up in time for me to be able to fit them and insert a piece before the video goes live, what will be the end of this week, which will be, I think, something like the 23rd or 4th of May. Well, as you can see, the station is back on the layout. It has its lights. They arrived this morning when I was supposed to be finishing this video off and getting it uploaded so it could go out on Friday. But once they arrived, I simply couldn't resist trying to get it all done, which has involved me crawling around under the layout. But nonetheless, they're there. They look really good. They're very nice, good lights. I'll see if I can I bought 2 sets, so I have another one which I can show to the camera, so you can get a good look at what it looks like. In the end, I was able to prise off the roof sufficient to be able to completely replace the light, so it's shining down inside, but it gives a very dim light. It may not, I think I'm zoned in as much as I can, it may not show very well here. What I'll do in a moment is I'll just draw the blinds down and you'll get a better idea of the light inside, which is quite dull. So if I just pull the blinds down, I'm hoping that you can now see, I think you can, that there is indeed light inside as well. So let's just put a bit more light on the subject. So I'm very pleased with these lights. They didn't cost very much. I think it was something like £2 for, that's a good question. How much were they? Can't remember. I know the 4 altogether, including postage, only cost me about £8. If I get this into the camera, let's just zoom out and focus it. There you go. That's what I've put 2 of those on. The hoop is probably, if you were thinking strictly in terms of scale, rather large, but there are always things that you have to do just to accommodate the fact that you're working in N scale, and to do it absolutely to scale would be very, very small indeed. But they give a nice pool of light on the platform. And I've just completed a running session with the blinds down and with all the lights on and the engines running around, and I think the overall effect is rather pleasing. So that was something I had no intention to do until I really had enough of the platform buckling, and taking it off the layout has given me the opportunity to make it look very much better. Right, okay, then on to the next section, which is the running section, which I've just completed, which I hope you'll enjoy, with something a bit special at the end of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the shot of the Flying Scotsman and Mayflower double heading, a tour that was running up to Aberdeen. I went up the line from Edinburgh to a place called Aberdour, where I knew the curve of the track would give me some decent shots, and I also knew from the train times that the ScotRail service was due in on platform 1, which is why I wasn't stood over the other side. And I did feel for those who were up the far end when the service came in, just as Scotsman and Mayflower came thundering through. I was able to get much closer to Scotsman. I'm involved with the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, and went out to Bowness on the day after it had completed some tours that it ran for us, or for Rail Tours Limited, on the Sunday. And this photograph, which I'm just going to put up now, I had the honour of standing very close to that engine indeed, and it is a beautiful engine. So back to the layout and what we're doing here. Lots of a number of quite small things. You'll have seen the changes to Greyhaven stations, which weren't really intended, but there you go, I did them nonetheless. If you have a look at the fire station, you will now see that the firemen are in position. And what I'll do now is I'll move to some handheld video, just to give you a better idea of what's happening around the corner there, and which will also give you an idea of the fencing that has started to be erected. You can see it at the back of the hotel. You can see it also behind the War Memorial, because I think that is the position that I'm now going to go with the hotel and the War Memorial. And the idea is going to be there'll be a small, very short path coming up the side of the fire station, which runs from the fire escape. But otherwise, and at the front, I'm going to have a paved area of the kind that you might have in front of a civic building of this kind. But for the rest, it's all going to be grass up until just to the left of the War Memorial. The idea being that this was all part of the town hall grounds, and when they decided to build the War Memorial, they merely gave up what was a larger parked area to put the War Memorial in what was very tight space. So the next piece of work for me here now is to finalise the arrangements for that area. I'm also going to be putting a light. That Fowler building came with inserts for the inside, because there's no internals to that building at all. It's just essentially 4 walls. And I discovered that if putting a light inside gives a really nice light effect, which I may be using on the Art Deco Hotel, and more of that in the next video. There's been some scenic work done at the back. I mentioned that before because I'm now able to complete the scenic work, and it's now been, the scenic work is pretty much complete up to where that piece of fence ends, and now I can carry on a bit further round. And once I've got the park in and the grassed area around the War Memorial and the town hall, it'll be time to start putting in the road bridge that carries the road up from the lower level up towards the station. And by then we will have completed all the scenics at the back end around to this side, which is really quite exciting. Because once that's done, it'll be a toss-up to whether I can hold off from building High Elven, which I would like to do to bring the line to its conclusion, or I start doing the ballasting work in and around the motive power depot, which is lots of ballasting in and around points, which I must confess, putting off. So we'll see which way it goes. But if I just zoom out a bit now, so the layout is really beginning, I think, to come together. I've still got people to get to start fixing in the market. That there's no people there yet, which just doesn't work. But I'm going to do that in small doses rather than trying to do 100 figures all in one go, because I think it will take at least 100 to make that look realistic. I think do them 10 at a time, and it'll work quite happily. A last pan round to see Greyhavens with its lights, and the trains as they gently move around. I hope you've enjoyed this update. If you have, please do like it. It's really helpful if you do that. If you haven't subscribed before, well, please do subscribe. And please do let me have your comments. I really love getting your comments. They're very helpful to me. They've helped no end in terms of design and ideas. So I look forward to receiving those. But until I speak to you again, bye bye from me. Bye bye.